Today we're going to be talking about pine trees and some general tips and techniques for creating your own version of a pine tree for whatever mock you have in mind. This kind of tree seems to pop up pretty frequently, and there's a lot of scenarios where you would need a pine tree, so I just wanted to talk about some of the different techniques that I've used in the past. So here I have 6 different ones. Some of these ones are kind of similar to each other, but I'll just go through them just so you can kind of look and decide for yourself which one fits your situation the best. So let's just go ahead and look into some of the differences of these. I think it's pretty easy to see some of the obvious differences with these ones using some of the grass pieces, these using the ferns, and then this one using the larger leaf elements. I think you can generally get the idea. Obviously these ones have a little bit more in common. These ones are pretty similar, just some slightly different ways of connecting the inside of it. And then this one is kind of its own thing over there. This one I've used quite a bit. You may have seen it in some of my mocks and other videos. So I'll definitely go over that one just because I've had a lot of interest in that one and how to build it. So I'll kind of show that. But yeah, so you can kind of see just the general different foliage. Each tree does kind of focus on one specific kind of foliage piece. So like the grass stuff, obviously, ferns, pretty self-explanatory. So let's just go ahead and look at some of these. All right, we're gonna look at the first and simplest of the designs. This one is really, really simple. It really does only use these snot bricks, these 1x1s with the studs on all the sides, and then these grass pieces. And just for fun, I added a bunch of these dark green stem pieces at the points of each of these just to kind of give it an interesting look. I thought it looked pretty decent. And in the middle, we are just kind of like alternating these so they're offset every other. And if you look in the middle there, you can kind of see that. Even if I take some of these off, you can just kind of see how they're just kind of rotating ever so slightly, like 45-degree angles here. And that just makes sure that we have stuff going every direction and kind of fills in all those gaps. But really pretty simple. We're just kind of slowly adding on more stems as we go further down. And that just gives us this nice general kind of triangular Christmas tree shape that we're looking for. So this one, pretty simple. It is very parts intensive. Honestly, all of these are pretty parts intensive, but this one is probably the most parts intensive just because the amount of these grass pieces that it uses. It's a lot, and if you're doing a bunch of these, that can add up a ton. Thankfully, these pieces have all pretty much been on the pick a brick wall in LEGO stores, so if you've been fortunate enough to grab some of those, then maybe you already have a bunch of these parts. But that's this one. Let's look at the next one. This one is pretty similar, but you can see already just some different techniques being used. The top half of it, although it is falling apart, the top half is basically the same as that other one, but only for this top section. And then at the top, I just kind of topped it with some upside down ones instead of some right side up ones. And I just think that looks a little bit nicer there on the top. Now, I did not really finish the back, so we can kind of look at it a little bit better, but you can see right here in the middle, I'm using a very illegal technique where this disc piece that has all of these like spots for clips and holes, I just kind of stuck that on a stem there. Very illegal technique, but it is getting the job done, and it is pretty sturdy. So it works for me, and it makes it look pretty good, I think. And then I'm just sticking these on there, and then you can see I'm using these pieces with these bars going all the way around, and these clips, and these studs with the hole, and just putting those all the way around and kind of angling them up. And I feel like that gives a really nice look. Now, of course, you might want to have this all be brown. I didn't have brown ones, so I'm just kind of using what I had. But that is up to you. You can use whatever colors you want, and you could even stick all of those dark green stems on the end of each of these too, if you wanted that. So just another technique. Again, some highly illegal techniques, and maybe there's a better way that I could connect that in there than how I did it, but that was the way I could figure out to do it. So let me know in the comments if you figure out a better way to connect that for this style of tree. Let me know. I'd love to see, because if there's something that I can do that makes it not an illegal technique, I'd love to do that. Now we're going to look at our fern techniques, and these 3 trees all have some slightly different ways of getting a tree to look like this, using these fern pieces. So I'm gonna look at the smallest one first, and then we'll look at some of these. They're pretty similar in a lot of ways, these two bigger ones especially, but we just kind of have some patterns on them that we repeat and use in different ways to get the desired result. So I'll look at the smallest one first though. Starting off at the top, we just have this simple bar with a bunch of those ferns just kind of stuck in there at the top. So we're just gonna kind of dissect this tree and look at the different layers of it. So you can already kind of start to see I am using these round plates with the Technic pin in the middle, and that Technic pin is actually really important because it not only holds it together, but it allows us to have a little bit of rotation that we would not have been able to have otherwise. And you can see it allows us to also invert the pieces here, so we can have the upside down ferns, which is of course what we want for a tree to look like this. So then I've taken off the base of it here and this section here, and you can see again that is just using all those plates. You can figure out your own spacing and what works best for you, and that was just stuck on top there. And now this is using a bunch of these pieces with these bars kind of going up in 4 different directions. And we're using those, and because we are on this Technic like axle in the middle, we're able to not have them all straight because they're not attached. This one here is just kind of floating there in the middle, and that allows us to get a little bit more rotation and direction that we want for this. Because of course, if we just did them all stacked up, they would only be on this T-axis, and we want, of course, to fill in the X-axis as well. So that just kind of allows us to do that, and then we can just stick in our trunk there, put this on top, and then top it off with the top there. And this is maybe a little bit small, but this technique I think you could kind of use in a forest and it would probably look good. The hard thing with this is you can't really get much wider just with this technique because it is kind of limited by this 2x2 piece with the bars. There's only a 2x2 version of it as far as I know. So we're only able to kind of get about this wide. That's about as wide as you're able to get just with this technique, which means you're kind of limited to not going crazy tall, or else it would just look like one really narrow tall tree. So that is kind of a downfall of this technique, but for some smaller trees, I think it works well. Now this one that I'm going to show you, I think looks a lot better. However, I think it's a lot more unstable. So this one is a little bit more fragile, and it might even fall apart in my hands, hoping not, but let's just look at some of the techniques that make up this thing. So on the inside here, you can see I'm using a bunch of these like lollipop pieces stuck into these snot 1x1 bricks, and that just allows us to kind of flip these upside down. And then you can even see the brick itself is upside down. So they're all stuck into this round 1x1 or 2x2 with the hole in the middle tile. And that just allows us to stick the stud into it, and then I've also reinforced it with a bar going through. So these are all pretty firmly attached, but you can see I'm just using that technique with a variation of 1, 2, or 3 of these attached onto the lollipop pieces. You can see like these ones, this layer actually has 1, 2, 3 pieces attached onto that lollipop. I can even take it apart so you can see better. So these 2 were on the top, and then I'm just sticking one right there on the bottom. And then just kind of filling in the holes where it needs it. And that's easier to do for a specific situation than just for a general prescription. Like, it's hard to prescribe one way for everything because I don't know what your mock situation is. But this is the general technique, and we're just kind of using that going up. And then above that, we start having to get a little bit more creative with some different ways as we get narrower. So you can see I'm using 2 of these popsicle pieces, and then I am actually, instead of attaching them to the stud, I am sticking them through the hole and then using the stud to attach to more of these snot bricks. So you can see, it's kind of dark, but you can see right here, it is just stuck on there. And that just allows us to get a little bit more narrow. And then at the top, I am simply sticking all of these through a bar. and there goes the whole thing. So there's a bar just going up the middle, and I'm just sticking these on just to top off the whole thing. So that is a really nice way to make the tree just get a lot narrower towards the top. And then once you have the top and the base, you can kind of customize and modularize it to get the specific shape and style of tree that you want. And in the middle, between the top and the middle section, I do kind of have this little piece with this T-plate that just kind of helps bridge the gap of sizes. So it allows that to connect there. And that this piece right here, this layer, kind of helps bridge the gap and fill a gap that was there left if you didn't have that piece. And here, this other tree, this is actually the biggest one. I've already kind of taken it apart. You can see it's basically using the same techniques with the lollipops, but if you're needing to extend anything, an easy way to do that is just with these 1x1 studs and just 1x1 round bricks. That just allows us to kind of lengthen it out further from the trunk so you can have bigger trees. So you can play with that, see whatever works for you, but I just figured I would show that as well in case you were wanting to have bigger trees than the ones that I'm showing. And then the last one we are going to look at is this pine tree. This is one I have used in several MOCs. It is basically just a variation of my normal tree that I've used in also a lot of MOCs and I've made videos about. So if you're interested in that, make sure to check that out. But this one is just using a bunch of these snot bricks again. So for each tree, pretty much you're gonna need a bunch of these. And then just putting plates on there, reinforcing it with bars, putting plates on there to make sure it's all nice and strong. And then using clips with these 1x2 plates with the little bar and just attaching a bunch of plants to them. And you can really put those wherever you want around this whole thing since there's studs in every direction. And then you can also kind of angle them more down, obviously, if you want that, angle them more up. You can really play with it. At the top, because it does get a little bit more narrow, I've had to kind of do some different stuff, but nothing really crazy. I'm just using some of these plates, 1x1s, to extend them so everything fits. And then I've even inverted the leaf so it's pointing up instead of all these ones pointing down. And then at the top, I just have a simple assembly like this that I can just stick right there. So one downside with this is it is all on a grid just because the studs are only on the 4 sides and it's hard to get like a corner. I'm sure there's maybe some ways that we can play with that, but as a general foundation, I think this does work pretty well. And it's a little bit more different than what you're used to seeing with the grass trees. Like these, I feel like these are pretty common, and this just has a little bit more of a unique feel that maybe isn't seen as often. So it does have some interest factor there. And then of course, there's a lot of different colors of these. So if you wanted some different colors of them, that would be easy to do with that as well. Obviously, I am a fan of this one just because I've used it quite a bit, and it even allows you to put little mushrooms and things on there, which I think is fun. And then of course you can make the trunk of it look a lot better than I did here. That is just a general mock-up. And then you can find a way to attach it just with a Technic brick like that. Stability wise, I would say these are the ones that are the strongest. This is the one with the Technic pin going all the way through. This is the one, the first one I showed, just using the grass pieces. That one is pretty sturdy. And then this one is pretty strong because it is really reinforced and then it's pinned to the ground too. So this one really is quite strong. The leaves, as long as the pieces are in good quality, they should be pretty stable. But if these are older pieces, I could see these leaf pieces kind of breaking off, but it does take a little bit of work to do that, especially if the pieces are nice and crisp. So that's gonna do it for this video. Hopefully you learned something from this. Hopefully you thought some of these were interesting or were techniques you hadn't seen before. Let me know in the comments which one was your favorite, and if you plan to use any of these at any point for one of your own MOCs, let me know. Even share your MOC with me. I'd love to see that. You can share that with me on Instagram at earthbricksyt. That is a good place where you can get in contact with me and send me some photos of your MOCs, because I'd love to see that. But thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like the video and subscribe if you aren't already. It really does help it grow and just kind of tells me that you guys are actually interested in this kind of content, this kind of video. So thanks for watching. Here's some more videos for you. I'll see you in the next one.